It's interesting that all these classic texts that you're bringing up tend to be in Paul or John, because people have no difficulty at all with Matthew, Mark, and Luke. Have you ever wondered why there's a Matthew, Mark, and Luke? 3 versions corroborating, because I think God in his wisdom understood that people would twist John. They desperately need Matthew, Mark, Luke. Desperately. Everybody does. That actually is not so hard if one has paid attention to what John means by I am he. Jesus says a number of times, unless you believe that I am he. It's very easy to show that that is not what was said in Exodus 3:14. It doesn't say I am God. In Exodus 3:14, God said of himself, ego imi oon, I am the self-existing one. Jesus never ever said that. He said, I'm he. It simply means I'm the one. And so the key to this, when you're explaining this to your friends, is to turn to the first occurrence of that phrase. And that's found in John 4:26. Jesus said to the lady at the well, this is a classic and wonderful event, by the way. He's talking as he wasn't supposed to be talking to a woman, much less a Samaritan woman. But she's a bright theologian, this lady. And he says to her in John 4:26, this is the first occurrence, and that's very important in the Bible, the first occasion in which this phrase is used. He says, Jesus said to her, let me read the context, verse 25. The woman said to him, I know that Messiah is coming, the one called Christ. When that one comes, he will tell us everything. That was a woman of faith. I love that. A woman of faith. She had faith in the Messiah. And Jesus then turns to her, looks her in the eye, and says in verse 26, Jesus said to her, I, who is the one speaking to you, am he. Is he saying I'm God? Of course not. But people don't use this verse. This is the first occurrence, I repeat, the first occurrence of the I am he thing. In Greek, ego eimi. I'm it. It's me. Later on, the blind man, they were looking to see where he was, and he says, it's me. I'm the one who got my sight back. It's a very easy thing. But most of your Trinitarian commentaries will try to tell you that Jesus is there saying, I am the self-existing one. It's just not true. He wouldn't have said that. They would have locked him up, and rightly so, if he was claiming to be ego eimi or on, I'm the self-existing one. Of course not. So am I in the right text here? I think I am, 8:58. Before Abraham came to be, I am the Messiah. He was the Messiah in God's plan from the very start. So before Abraham was even born, that's a stupendous claim. But the claim is to be the Messiah, ego eimi or Christos. That was the conversation there, but people don't bother to look at the conversation or the context of that marvelous story of the Samaritan woman speaking to Jesus at the well. It's amazingly beautiful, but it doesn't say I'm God. That would immediately destroy Jesus. It's awful to say Jesus is God because he couldn't die. Then you have no savior. God cannot die. Jesus cannot die. Jesus cannot be God. It's as easy as that. So ponder that as you fall asleep at night, wake up in the morning, meditate on this day and night, and you'll see the beauty, I think, of the simplicity of Jesus being the Messiah, the Son of God.
There is actually a pretty awful mishandling of this phrase by translators. Check it out for yourself. Don't take my word for it, but it's very obvious as you're working your way through the occurrences of this phrase in the book of John, as Anthony brings out about the dear lady at the well in John 4, and beginning there, that's the first occurrence of this in John. And then it occurs in other places. But it's always obvious that Jesus is making the explanation that I am the Messiah. I am the coming one, the Christ of God, not God, but the Christ of God. And that is clear over and over and over again. He's the one that God has sent to be the Savior of the rest of us human beings. So I think it's pretty awful that they have actually, it's some, not all, but some of the folks out there who are working with this passage are actually carefully turning and twisting and trying their best to get it to say something the passage obviously never says. And then as you see that, that way of kind of turning with the passage by various commentators, some commentators, not all certainly, but then you begin to say, oh, wait a minute, something is wrong here. What are these guys doing anyway? And when you hit John 8:58, if you have even a rudimentary understanding of the Jewish notion of a preexistence by foreknowledge, a preexistence by plan, then it's not a problem for those folks that Jesus would be speaking to that were people of faith and understanding to recognize, of course, he's talking about his preexistence before even Abraham, before Moses, before David. He was back before these people in God's program, not only in terms of time, but in terms of priority. He is the great one. He is the one, the Christ of God.
To take it on from Anthony's point about the first occurrence of the I am saying in John 4, it actually occurs 2 other times before this in the very chapter of John chapter 8. It occurs, the same expression occurs in verse 24. Why don't the translators, if they're going to be consistent, capitalize that? The answer is because it doesn't fit. It doesn't work with their theology. And again, it occurs in verse 28. When you lift up the Son of Man, then you will know that I am the Almighty. No, it doesn't work. So they don't put it in. They're very inconsistent and I think duplicitous and have a lot to answer for. You will know that I am he, the Messiah, the promised one. You'll find the same thing, of course, further on in John, for example, in John chapter 13 and verse 19. From now on, I'm telling you before it comes to pass. When it does occur, you may believe that I am he, not capitalized by our erstwhile translators. So this is important. Now, the other thing, of course, always again, context is king. If you just go back a couple of verses even with the great discussion between Jesus and the Jews, the discussion is, is Jesus the Messiah, the promised one or not? And you'll notice that in verse 56, Jesus says to them, your father Abraham rejoiced to see my day, and he saw it and was glad. So what Jesus is saying here is that Abraham, by faith, when he was told about his progeny, his seed, who would fulfill all of God's purposes and plans, that Abraham believed the promise of God, and he, looking forward into the future, he saw the coming Messiah who would fulfill all of God's promises. So this is what's under discussion, and I couldn't agree more that this terrible Trinitarian apologetic in verse 58 of capitalizing I am is just horrendously deceptive, and it makes me angry when I read supposedly solid evangelical, particularly commentators, who make a big point of this. But as Anthony has pointed out, the Exodus chapter 3, the Almighty says, "Eho emi on." In the Hebrew, it's Asher Ayaher, I will be. It's a future tense. I will be that which I will be. Tell them, he says to Moses, I will be has sent you. Jesus never ever makes this outrageous claim for himself.